"What is going on here?" he demanded. The woman stood tall, her voice steady. Kunle looked at her from head to toes, trying to recognize the face behind the grip's white marks or her voice. But everything looked strange to him. He ordered the security man to throw her out. And as the security man walked towards her, she revealed her true identity. Bisola was the epitome of success, a woman of power, grace, and elegance, the kind of woman people admired and envied. At just 32, she owned and controlled a massive business empire that she inherited from her late parents. She lived alone in a mansion and had luxury cars that turned heads whenever she went. Despite her wealth and beauty, love had eluded her. Many men came into her life, dazzled by her fortune. Some wanted her money, others feared her success, but none stayed for love. Disappointed and hurt, she believed that love was something she would never have. She buried herself in her work, accepting the loneliness that came with it. But fate had other plans. One evening, as the sun cast its golden glow, and the air blows gently in the atmosphere, Bisola was driving home after a long day at work, and her luxury car suddenly broke down on a quiet street. Frustrated and unsure of what to do, she stepped out, staring at the smoking engine. She tried her usual mechanic's phone number, and it was switched off. And then she called for a tow truck. But as she waited desperately, a young mechanic from a nearby workshop approached her. "Good evening, ma'am. You need some help?" he asked, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. He was tall, muscular, dressed neatly in white shirt and jean mechanic overall, and had a confident but kind smile. "You seem to have a problem with your car," he said calmly. Bisola hesitated as she looked up to see a neatly dressed man in his late 20s. His face was kind and confident, his voice gentle, and his gaze unwavering. He was nothing like the other mechanics she was used to, who appeared dirty due to the nature of their job, but she was desperate. "Yes, please," she sighed. "My car just stopped." The man introduced himself as Kunle, a mechanic with his own small workshop. "Don't worry, ma'am, I can fix this," he assured her. And in a matter of minutes, he was under the hood, working his magic. His hands moved with skill, and Bisola found herself admiring him. There was something refreshing about his simplicity, his raw charm, and the way he wasn't intimidated by her status. "Try it now," he said after a while. She turned the key, and the engine roared back to life. She smiled. "You are amazing," Kunle chuckled. "Just doing my job, ma'am." She paid him and collected his contacts, and they parted peacefully. From that day on, whenever Bisola had issues with her car, she would go to Kunle's workshop. She found herself admiring not just his skill, but his discipline and neatness, a rare qualities in most mechanics she had encountered. Kunle, on the other hand, came from a humble background and was more than a mechanic. He had a degree in business administration, but after years of searching for a job with no success, he decided to learn a trade and eventually opened his own small workshop, where he worked together with his childhood friend Tade. As time passed, their friendship blossomed. It was Bisola who first confessed her feelings when they sat together in a private candlelit moment inside a modest restaurant. She asked Kunle if he would consider dating her, though he was younger and not wealthy. Kunle looked surprised but intrigued. He hesitated for a while, unsure of what to say. She gave him some time to think about it, but when Kunle told his friend Tade, Tade looked at him with disgust. He stood over Kunle, gesturing passionately. "You mean you didn't give her a positive response?" he asked. his face filled with disbelief. Is something wrong with you, Kunle? A beautiful and wealthy woman humbled herself to be with you, and the only thing you could do is to reject her? Kunle, who sat conflicted and rubbing his forehead, took a deep breath and sighed. Don't forget that she's older than me, he said. And so what? Tade snapped back. Age is just a number, and the difference is not even much. You are not the first man to marry an older woman, and you will not be the last person, my friend. You better use your head and grab this opportunity before it slip off your hand. You don't know how lucky you are now, Tade said convincingly. And after much thought about everything, Kunle agreed to Bisola's proposal, and their friendship blossomed into love. Their love grew stronger, defying societal norms. Eventually, they got married, an in-house wedding with few friends and family members in attendance. And after the wedding, Kunle moved into Bisola's grand mansion. Bisola was happier than she had ever been. She didn't care about their differences and whispers from the wall. She loved and cherished him with all her heart. And few weeks into their marriage, Bisola wanted to give Kunle the world. So in her deep love and trust for him, she wrote her will, leaving everything she had inherited and labored for years to him. She wanted him to feel like the head of the family. She also made him a co-signatory to the business account, and Kunle began to work in the company. At first, Kunle was the perfect husband. He treated her like a queen, and they lived in bliss. However, money and power change people, and as time passed, things began to change. Kunle's childhood friend Tade began to whisper in his ear, influencing him negatively. Slowly, Kunle, once humble and hardworking, started acting differently, and his attitude towards Bisola shifted. He started withdrawing large amounts of money from the company's accounts, spending recklessly with his friend Tade, and Bisola dared not question him. He stayed out late, became rude and dismissive of Bisola, finding fault in everything she did. At first, Bisola ignored the warning signs. She believed he would come back to his senses, but things only got worse. Kule started to follow younger women, flaunting his newfound wealth and status. When Bisola found out, she was devastated and heartbroken, and one night she confronted him about his actions. But instead of being remorseful, Kule snapped at her. You are overreacting, Bisola. I'm just living my life, Kunle said, his eyes cold and defensive. Tears welled in Bisola's eyes. Living your life? With other women and with my money? She asked, her voice trembling with frustration. His face hardened. You are too old for me, Bisola, he yelled. I need younger and fresher women. Bisola's heart shattered. A cold shiver ran down her spine, but she said nothing. She stood there disheartened, reflecting at his statements. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was now a stranger. She tried to bear the pain, not wanting to give her best friend Shade any ammunition. Shade had always been her loudest critic and her biggest protector. She had never approved of their marriage and would often say, I told you so. When Bisola told Shade about her decision to will all her properties to Kunle, Shade bluntly frowned at it. Please, Bisola, don't try it. I am begging you. I have bad feelings about this your decision. You barely know this man, she had said. Why not wait until after some years together? Shade pleaded, her face edged with concern. Bisola leaned forward. It's my husband we are talking about here, Shade. Are you saying I shouldn't trust my husband? She asked, her face filled with disbelief. I am not talking about trust or love. I'm talking about your future and your life, Bisola. Think about this deeply. Enough, Shade, Bisola shot back. I know you never liked him, and I know you don't know what it means to be married. I love and trust my husband, and he loves me too. Her word hit Shade like a physical slap. She opened her mouth in awe, surprised at her friend's sudden reaction. She didn't say anything. She excused herself and left. Days turned into weeks, and things only got worse. Kunle barely looked at Bisola anymore. He spent nights in clubs, surrounded by younger women, throwing away everything she had worked for. And worst of all, he no longer cared about hiding it. One stormy night, Bisola sat alone in her mansion, her heart heavy with sorrow, as she stares at their wedding picture that once made her heart swell with happiness. But now, it is a painful reminder of her mistake. She had given Kule everything, her love, her trust, her wealth, and in return, he had betrayed her. She had to do something, but don't know exactly what to do. She thought of all the warning from her friend Shade and how she had foolishly ignored them. Shade had tried her best. She had noticed how Bisola's countenance had changed from a once cheerful and friendly lady to a now withdrawn, quiet, moody, and lost in deep thought woman, wearing a fake smile and always in a hurry to leave whenever they are together. Shade had asked if everything was all right, and Bisola would dismissively replied all is well with a fake smile. She decided not to press further. She had learnt not to poke nose in Bisola's marital affairs due to the way she reacted to her the last time when she warned her about her will. And now, everything Shade had feared were already coming to pass. One fateful day, as the sun set gradually and the weather turned cloudy as if it wanted to rain, Bisola was returning home from a shopping mall, and suddenly a group of marksmen stopped her vehicle. Before she could know what was happening, they took her away. No one knew where she was, and Shade tried to question Kule, but he seemed unconcerned. She went to the police station to report Bisola's missing, her face filled with worries and emotions. The police took her statements and swung into action immediately, but every effort to find Bisola proved fruitless. Bisola's friends and family were shocked, but no one knew what had really happened to her. Kule, unfazed, moved on with his life. And few weeks later, one of his young mistresses moved into the mansion with him, and they continued living in the mansion, spending Bisola's wealth lavishly. But karma was coming. 2 years passed, and no trace of Bisola was found, and life in the mansion continued with Kunle, his wife, and his friend Tade. But one fateful day, as the sun shines brightly, burning everything in its path, and the air seems to cease, making people feel sweaty and thirsty, a woman dressed in flowing deep blue hijab, covering her body from head to toes, stands at the gate of the mansion, holding a small bag. She wears a gripped white nose mask and appears fragile but determined. Her hand raised mid-knock, and she knocked furiously, yelling, "Open these gates. This house is mine." The gatekeeper, a stern older man in brown security uniform, glares at her with suspicion. "Who are you looking for?" he asked sternly. "Open these gates. This house is mine," the woman repeated, her voice unwavering. The gateman looked at her with disgust. "Go away, confused woman," he barked. But she kept knocking, kept waiting, and kept yelling. The noise drew Kunle's new wife outside. "Adamu, what is the noise all about?" she asked, standing at the front stage sternly. "Madam, it's one strange woman," he replied. "Strange woman? But what does she want, and who is she looking for?" she demanded. "I don't know, madam." She looked confused and tired, shouting that I should open the gates, that this house belonged to her. Upon hearing that word, Kunle's wife walked to the gates. "Who are you?" she demanded. "This is my house," the woman declared, "and I have come to reclaim it." The laughter that followed was cruel. "You must be confused, ma'am. Maybe you should check the next building," she replied her. The woman looked at her with a knowing smirk. "We would know who is confused when the time comes," she replied. At that moment, Kunle himself with his friend Tade stepped out. "What is going on here?" he demanded. The woman stood tall, her voice steady. She turned to him and repeated, "This house, the company, everything you own belongs to me." Kunle looked at her from head to toes, trying to recognize the face behind the grip's white marks or her voice. But everything looked strange to him. He ordered the security man to throw her out. And as the security man walked towards her, she revealed her true identity. Kunle staggered back, his face pale and his eyes widened with fear. "Ghost!" he screamed, turning to run, but it was too late. A crowd had gathered as Bisola removed her disguise, revealing her real identity. Some neighbors recognized her immediately, gasping in shock. She told her story, how she had endured Kunle's cruelty, only for him to send men to kidnap and get rid of her. She told them how one of the thugs had recognized and spared her life because her late parents had once been of help to him. She was wont to leave the city, and as she boarded a vehicle, trying to look for where to stay for a while, their car had an accident. Some people lost their life immediately, some were badly injured, and she had a fracture on her forehead. A good Samaritan took them to the hospital, and she was in coma for several months until she finally woke up and could not remember anything. The doctor, a kind-hearted man in his 40s, took a particular interest in her and took care of her like his own sister. And all this while, she had been staying with him, and he had been nothing but a nice person to her, trying all his best to see that she remembered her past. He had wanted to make an official report at the police station, or at least take her picture to the press to announce her missing. But something kept telling him to wait until she recovers fully. And one fateful day, as she was watching a program from the television, Kunle's 30th birthday party, which he celebrated lavishly in an expensive hotel, dressed in a fancy suit, surrounded by women and flashing lights. And then his name, his face, and his voice kept ringing in her head. She told the doctor, and he did a background finding about who Kunle was, where he lived and worked, and as he handed her all the information he gathered, she remembered her past. As she recovered fully, she waited for the right time to return, and now she is back to reclaim what belonged to her. The crowd gasped in shock and turned on Kunle. His face was filled with shame as the people cursed him for his wickedness. Then came the final blow. Bisola smirked and said, "The documents I gave you, they were all fake. The real ones are still with me. Thanks to Sade's advice. She told me to use fake documents, just in case something like this happened." Kunle's world crumbled. He had nothing. The company, the mansion, everything was still legally Bisola's. The police were called, and before the police arrived, some young men in the streets, who Bisola had been nice to, started giving Kunle a beating of his life. They were furious at what he had done to her, and by the time the officers arrived, he was bruised and broken. The police intervened, but not before Kunle had suffered a severe beating. They took him away, bruised and battered, to the police station. Bisola watched as Kunle was taken away, a mix of emotions swelling inside her. She felt a sense of vindication, but also sadness. She had loved Kunle, and a part of her still couldn't believe what he had done. At the police station, Kunle was charged with attempted murder, theft, and forgery. The police officer in charge of the case, a no-nonsense woman named Inspector Ogunde, took Bisola's statement and began to investigate. As the news of Kunle's arrest spread, the media descended upon the mansion. Reporters and camera crews gathered at the gates, clamoring for a statement from Bisola. She emerged, composed and dignified, and addressed the press. "I just want to thank the police for their diligence and hard work in bringing Kunle to justice," she said. "I'm grateful to my friends and my family for their support, and to the doctor and good neighbors who have stood by me. I'm looking forward to rebuilding my life and moving on from this ordeal." The media frenzy continued for days, with Kunle's case making headlines in the newspapers and on television. The public was shocked and outraged by his actions, and many called for him to face the full weight of the law. As the trial began, Bisola took the stand, dressed in an elegant black suit, speaking passionately. She recounted the events leading up to her disappearance and the abuse she had suffered at his hand. Kunle's lawyer tried to discredit her, but Bisola's testimony was compelling and convincing. The prosecution presented evidence of Kunle's financial misdeeds, including the fake documents and the large sums of money he had withdrawn from the company's accounts. They also presented testimony from witnesses who had seen him with his mistresses. Kunle's defense was weak, and it became clear that he had no intention of denying the charges. Instead, he tried to shift the blame to Bisola, claiming that she had been abusive and controlling. But the evidence was against him, and the judge found him guilty on all counts. Kunle was sentenced to several years in prison, and the court ordered him to pay back the money he had stolen from Bisola. As the verdict was read, Bisola felt a sense of closure. She knew that she would never be able to get back the years she had lost, but she was determined to rebuild her life and move on. The mansion, once a symbol of her pain and suffering, was now a symbol of her strength and resilience. Bisola returned to her company, determined to rebuild and restore it to its former glory. She surrounded herself with people who loved and supported her, including her friend Shade, who had been a rock throughout the ordeal. I hope you enjoyed this story that has so many moral lessons. Comment what you have learned below. Please support the channel by liking the video, share to your friends and family, and please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more. Thanks and God bless you. See you in the other videos.